you're not getting rich. You do really well, but you're not getting rich. You're not creating any leverage. When you go to Disneyland with your kids, every hour feels like you're losing $200 on top of what it costs to be at Disney World. I could give you a dozen reasons, but the main, most self-interested one is that it limits your income for no good reason.
Why do growing businesses go broke? Welcome to the Profit Answer Man podcast. I'm Rocky Lalvani, and I help 7- and 8-figure business owners scale profits and cash flow while working less. Every week, we dig into proven methods like the Profit First system, other cash flow strategies, and real execution. No accounting jargon, no fluff. If you're going to be the backbone of America, creating jobs and serving your mission, you deserve to be well rewarded. We're Profit First certified professionals. If you want the masterclass, check out episodes 2 through 13, including Mike Michalowicz, where I break down the entire Profit First book, chapter by chapter. If you want, grab your free copy of the Profit Blueprint book at profitcomesfirst.com and start making profit a habit today. You built this business to serve your mission and your freedom. Let's make sure it pays you back. We also offer strategic tax planning and preparation to help you keep more of that profit. Now let's dive in. If you've ever hired someone by the hour and felt that slow sinking feeling when you get the invoice, you already know the truth. Hourly billing sucks. It creates mistrust, rewards inefficiency, and it caps income for the expert while pushing the risk onto the client. Nobody wins. Today's guest is one of the clearest voices on how to get out of that trap, Jonathan Stark. He's a former software developer, and he's been on a mission since 2006 to rid the world of hourly billing. He's author of Hourly Billing is Nuts and hosts Ditching Hourly podcast. In this episode, we'll get into the nuts and bolts of why hourly billing breaks relationships, how to position and price based on outcomes instead of effort, and how fixed fees can actually improve client results and your cash flow. It doesn't matter what kind of business you're in. You have to change how you think about money and billing. By the way, for our clients, that's what we do. On the tax side, that's what my wife does. You know your prices up front, and you never have to worry when we suggest something extra because it's already included. We know how to build efficiency and deliver to you. Let's meet Jonathan and see how you can too. Welcome to the Profit Answer Man, Jonathan Stark. It's great to have you join us today.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
And I'm excited to learn from you. Can you share a little bit about yourself and your business?
Sure. I am a former software developer who's now on a mission to rid the world of hourly billing. I've been doing that since 2006. So coming up on 20 years this summer. Is that right? Wow. And several years ago, I guess it was 2016, so 10 years ago almost, I published a book called Hourly Billing is Nuts, where it was sort of like a manifesto against the pricing, air quotes, pricing practice that was prevalent and still is prevalent in the software development space. I could go into why I hate it. I'm sure we're going to talk about all that, but yeah, that's my background. Eventually, I switched off of hourly billing. Around 2006, I switched off of hourly billing, and a whole bunch of my colleagues started to ask me to teach them what I was doing instead. And that was a very slow ramp into what I do now, which is coaching for expertise-based businesses.
So you're like the OG of our non-hourly billing.
There are a lot of big names. Well, I shouldn't say a lot. There are a number of big names in the field who were talking about it before I was. For example, my introduction to value-based pricing specifically was Alan Weiss, but also Ron Baker. I read several Ron Baker's books, Blair Enns. There are a number of people out there banging this drum, which makes me happy because that's my mission, is for more people to not fall into the hourly trap.
We had Alan Weiss on a couple of years ago. We talked
Yeah.
about legacy, not so much that, but his
Mhm.
$1 million consulting work and some of his other stuff is great. I guess I didn't really think of him as, yeah, it was just different because just the way he does stuff is different, but that kind of makes sense.
Mhm.
Why is hourly billing so bad?
Well, I mostly work with soloists, people that don't have employees or certainly not a lot of employees. And in a situation like that, an hourly rate puts an artificial ceiling on your income. Like, who would want that? You basically got 2,000 hours a year. Maybe you don't even want to work that much, but let's say you've got 2,000 hours a year. They're not going to be all billable. And let's say your hourly rate is even $200. You're not you're not getting rich. You do really well, but you're not getting rich. You're not creating any leverage. When you go to Disneyland with your kids, every hour feels like you're losing $200 on top of what it costs to be at Disney World. So I could give you a dozen reasons, but the main, most self-interested one is that it limits your income for no good reason.
What about from the client's perspective?
Hmm. I suppose some clients don't mind hourly billing, but I would say in that case, it's probably because it's what they expect from the industry, like whatever you sell. Maybe it's a lawyer, maybe it's a CPA, maybe it's a software developer, and they're not very experienced buyers, and they haven't yet been horribly burned by a project that went way over the estimated hours. Anybody who's been horribly burned in that way, including me, because I've hired people on an hourly basis, they hate it because you're taking all of the risk that the professional that you're hiring, you're taking a big risk that they are good at estimating, which is different than being good at their job. So they could be an amazing software developer, but they're horribly over optimistic about how quickly they can finish things. And you end up in this fight where the client said, you said it was going to be $10,000. And the developer says, well, I said it was an estimate. It was in bold print, estimate, estimate, estimate. And it doesn't matter because the client is forced to make a buying decision way up front. Is $10,000 reasonable for this thing that I believe that I'm going to get, this business outcome that I should get from this piece of software or this contract or whatever the deliverable is? And they have no choice but to make a decision based on that number. And then when it turns out that number was wrong, they are not happy. And if that number increases, it keeps ballooning out of control and it gets to a point where it is costing them more than the thing was worth to them in the first place, things get really ugly. I've seen people get sued. I've seen people get fired. It can get pretty bad when a project spins out of control. And it's extremely common. There have been studies where something like 80% of software projects go more than 100% over budget. And so I didn't like, that was another thing that's wrong with hourly billing is you're not delivering good client satisfaction when situations like that happen. And back when I worked at a firm and we did hourly, I noticed this. I was managing the firm, so I had visibility into all of the projects. And lo and behold, almost all of them went over the original estimated hours because you can't uncover enough scope in the original sales meeting. There are a whole bunch of reasons that we could go into. But what ended up happening was it created a really bad environment, bad trust environment between the buyer and the seller. So in this case, I'm the seller. I'm selling software development services. I underestimated how long something was going to take, and pretty soon, once you go over budget, the client starts to be like, I really like working with you, but this is getting ridiculous, and it starts to get very contentious. Let's say they start micromanaging you. They start going over your hours, and there's no, I don't think for any profession out there, I've never heard of any profession training people how to be better at estimating how much time it would take them to do their craft. They only teach how to do your craft. So if you're going to school to learn, computer science, you're going to law school, I've never heard of anyone getting educated on how to make better estimates. They just teach you how to be a better lawyer, how to be a better software developer. So why would you expect a lawyer or a software developer or mechanical engineer or CPA to be good at estimating their hours? it's just the whole thing is nonsense. The whole thing is nonsense. It's obviously, I think it's nuts. So,
One of my things is in the world of real estate.
mm-hmm.
And so that's flipping houses, rentals, all of that. And I learned in that business, you better damn well learn how good you are at estimating. And so we learned how to track and make sure that we are properly estimating. And what we tell our clients is, matter of fact, I had this conversation with a client just this morning.
Mm-hmm.
I go, your profit is based on the estimate. You estimate wrong, you gave away your profit. So let's learn how to estimate. And it's not that we're necessarily teaching how to estimate. We're learning how good you are at estimating. And if you're off by 50% each time, we're just going to double the estimate. Just figure out what you think it is, multiply by 2, because that's how bad you are at estimating.
Yeah.
And we'll just work with that number.
Mm-hmm.
But the other half of it that drives me up the wall is when I work, and I don't, but when you work with somebody on an hourly basis, especially an attorney, there is no incentive to improve their ability to get work done. Now, the internet kind of crushed attorneys with that. I'm like, why do I have to pay you $1,000 to write an LLC when it's the same damn document every time and you change 6 little words? And they got away with it for a long time. Now, not so much. But if you're paid for the project instead of the hour, you will figure out how to become more efficient, which means you make more money. And I think on the client side, and this is what drives me up the wall, is exactly what you said. Either they give you a really bad estimate, or they're bad at what they're doing, or you ask a simple question. I asked the attorney about a bill and I get a bill. I'm like, excuse me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or you ask for an update on the work they've done and you get a bill. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
that's not cool. And so I've never been a fan of it. That's why we always use a flat rate. And there are months we win, there are months we lose. And I don't really care because, and this is what the attorneys tell me too, when you don't have to track time, you save so much time. And you save so much aggravation, and you save so much arguing. I don't remember calling you on January 6th and talking to you for 12 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And it changes the relationship. The reason we actually did it was it is so much easier for me to fix a problem before it occurs than correct it after. And so if there is any friction between my client calling me with some crazy idea they're about to have or not, I want to remove it. And by
You want
having
to
a
know.
flat rate,
Right.
it's like, call me with your silly ideas before you execute on them. And there's not going to be a charge for that. So I'm okay listening. Like, let's make it happen. And I think it's worked out wonderfully from that standpoint.
Can I tell you a quick story about the efficiency thing?
Go ahead.
So when I first had my epiphany that hourly billing was basically causing a lot of problems in the firm that I was helping manage, I went solo to figure out some other way because I didn't know what else to do. I just noticed that if we were going to hire more employees, we should hire the cheapest, worst developers we could find because we build everybody out at the same rate. So who cares? As long as they keep the clients happy. And I was, and so like mathematically, I was like, that would be the thing to do. But emotionally, I was like, that's not what I want to do at all. I want to hire the best and brightest. And I want to benefit from that, not be punished by it. So I explained that to my boss and he was like, okay, I understand what you're saying in theory, but what would we do instead? And I had no answer for that. So I went solo to see if I could figure out what the answer was. And eventually came across Value-Based Fees by Alan Weiss, which was my Bible for a few years, and just alternative methods for pricing. So when I took my first project for which I gave a fixed price, I just remember this like it was yesterday. So I had client had come to me and he said, I need this new feature. I think it's going to be huge for us. So it was like a SaaS type of thing. I need this new feature. And I took a look at it and I said, let's say I priced it at $1,000. I said, yeah, I think it'll take me in my head, it'll probably take me about 40 hours. So maybe it was $5,000. I gave him a price of $5,000. And then when I got into it, he said, okay, great. Here's $5,000. Let's go. So I get into it and I found out almost immediately that it was going to be way, way harder than that. So it was going to take me a really long time, and that $5,000 wasn't going to go very far. So all of a sudden, in my brain, a thought occurred to me, completely unbidden by me, from somewhere in my subconscious that I had never had before. And that thought was, maybe there's a plugin I can buy that just does this right out of the box. And guess what? One Google search later, I found a plugin that was $700, which is a lot for a plugin. But it did exactly the thing I was about to build. So if we replay that story and we imagine that it was going to be hourly, it wasn't, but let's say it was hourly, and it was like, okay, I think it's going to be 40 hours. And then I get into it and I get back to him and say, oh, this is going to be more like 100 hours. Really sorry. That estimate was low. Do you still want me to do it? And then I do the whole thing and it ends up being 200 hours. And now he's way out of pocket. He is regretting that he ever hired me to do this. But it wouldn't be that I did anything immoral or wrong. I just underestimated it, which, I suppose that there is a point at which you could sue someone for such a thing. Deloitte seems to happen to Deloitte almost every year. But it was like that never happened because I gave a fixed price. And because the financial incentives were aligned such that the faster I got it done, the better it was for me. And the faster I got it done, the better it was for him, because then he could release it to his customers sooner. So it's better for both of us if it's done faster. So when I suggested this alternative, I was like, you can just buy this plugin and I'll integrate it into the software and you'll own the plugin. And, he bought the plugin, I integrated it, and everybody was happy. And I took off the $750. So like for the plugin. So it was like, great. But the important thing is, I never, ever would have had that thought if I was billing by the hour. I never would have thought to look for a plugin because why would I? That is just going to punish me financially if I found one. And that's not good for the client. It's much better for the client that I did look and did find a plugin.
I love having scorecards.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're sitting there and it's like, oh, I'm at 37 hours for the week and I need to hit 40, you're just going to slow. I mean, it's literally union mentality. And like you said, when I built my business, I wanted to take away all the disincentives so that we and the client were on rowing the same direction. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise it can get really, really bad. I remember I had one client who wanted to work with me and he kept fighting me on price. And I'm just like, I'm not going to play this game. And then he was like, well, if you can make me this much money, I'll pay you this much money. And I'm like, do you realize what you just said? I said, I can do that. I'm going to cut your salary. I'm going to make all these bad decisions for your company because I'll hit my goal and you'll pay me and you'll be in worse shape. And you really have to take away the disincentives. And I think this is where the value-based pricing, encouraging people to be super smart, encouraging you to get the best people. And I don't know, Bill Gates has a quote, and I think it's Bill Gates, and I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's like the value of a top-notch programmer is something like 1,000 times greater than an average programmer.
Yeah.
And so that's the key. But if you're paying by the hour, you're not getting 1,000. And there's no incentive. But if I know I can get one of those people and I'm building a value-based price, I know I can keep feeding him and we can own the market. And so I'm very much a fan of that.
Yeah, I love it.
So how does this work from a positioning standpoint, right? Because it may be a higher price or it's totally different than what someone is expecting.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. So let's start with the positioning piece. So if we start by assuming that you're good at what you do, you're good at your craft, whatever that is, and there's a name for it, you software developer or engineer or CPA or whatever, and you are subscribing to these ideas of giving fixed prices based on value instead of on cost, then it's like, okay, what's probably almost certainly going to happen, since people who are, let's say somebody asks you for a quote, and you give them a quote and you say, this is a fixed price, you won't spend a dime more than what it says here if you decide to work with me. And they say, well, this is twice as high as everything else we've got from your competitors, basically. And I would say something like, well, are those estimates? Are they willing to stand behind those prices, or are they just estimates? And they'll say, well, those are just estimates. Because the incentive for someone, especially for project work, is to lowball the estimate. They don't think they're doing it, but this is why so many estimates are like overly optimistic and end up being under budget, because there's a financial incentive to keep the estimate as low as possible. So the client will say yes. And then once it's too late and you're halfway through the project, but the budget's gone, they have a really hard decision to make, which is cut bait, kick you out, and start over from scratch with someone else, or keep going with you in hopes that it won't end up costing them more than they wanted to. There's all these sunk cost issues. But in the sale at the beginning, it's not always obvious why that would be the case. So if the client says to you, like, okay, the prospect says to you, well, you're twice as much as everybody else we're talking to, then I would say, well, if you can't tell the difference between me and the cheaper options, you should go with the cheaper option, like, obviously. And then get them to say, well, no, we trust you and we like your background and all these other things. Force them to say like why they don't want to go with the cheaper options. In which case they could potentially salvage the deal. They could potentially change my mind about not working with them, because this is like a red flag. If someone's like, well, how come you're so expensive? It's like, well, because I know what I'm doing and I'll give you a price that I'm willing to stand behind. And if it's not obvious to you that that's the case, then I'm not going to try and convince them on the spot. I've already lost the deal, basically, unless I can turn it around in that one conversation. So why does this lead back to positioning? It leads back to positioning because ideally your reputation will precede you. So when clients come to you, they already know you're going to be the most expensive. They already think you're the only person they could possibly hire. And you essentially have a monopoly on being the one and only at this very specific thing that the client wants. And then you don't get any of these conversations around like, oh, but the next guy's cheaper. It's more like, I don't know if we can afford that. Could we break the payments up into like, break it out over the first 3 months or something like that for cash flow reasons? And maybe I'll do that. It depends. But, I won't lower the price. And the positioning, I guess we didn't define the term here, but maybe your listeners already know what it is. But you want to be the one and only for something that matters to the client. You need to be meaningfully different from any other thing that they would possibly consider as a replacement, let's say, or a competitor or some alternative. And that's positioning exercise.
And I always try and tell clients you should be at the upper end of the price curve, not at the bottom, because if you're going to fight to be the cheapest, you're going to lose.
Well, you might win.
What. No, right. You're going to lose no matter what.
You might win at not making any money.
Well, that's losing, right?
Right.
And if you keep driving the price lower, you're losing. And you're going to have a customer that doesn't value quality. So you're going to be losing.
It's the wrong kind of buyer. You don't want that kind of
buyer. And my wife is now just starting her tax strategy and planning practice. And it wasn't even a question that we're going with a value price type of a program, because nobody talks to their accountant. I'm like, she loves talking to her clients. So I'm like, this is it. This way, you don't have to worry about how much time you like talking to people. You know what the commitments are and you can serve them well.
Mm-hmm.
My doctor is the same way too. I have a concierge doctor.
Yeah, me too.
And that's the way we work it out so that I can get immediate access. And we had an appointment a couple of weeks ago. It was an hour long. That's what I can pick how long I want to spend with him. So it definitely changes the game.
Yeah, it's radically better for the relationship with your clients. If you actually care about your clients and you want to improve their business, it is way better because you're financially incentivized for making their lives better instead of being punished for doing it more quickly.
That's correct. And you didn't mention something that is also extremely important. You get paid up front.
Yes, ask for 100% payment up front. Yes, it gives you something to negotiate instead of the price. If they do want to negotiate something, if they just feel like they have to negotiate something, it gives you something to concede. So you're not necessarily, you could be a total hard ass if you wanted. That's fine too. But if you do really want to work with the client and they've got some real reason why the 100% upfront payment can't work for their scenario, a lot of times it's cash flow, other times it's approvals. There could be different things. And sometimes you don't care because it's such a huge number that you almost don't want it all at once. It's like, I'd rather have it spread out. So, it's something to negotiate. It's something to concede so that you don't have to seem totally uncooperative and like a real prima donna.
It's funny. Alan taught me about that as well because he charges a big fee, like $100,000. And he used to offer his corporate clients a discount to pay up front. And he did it because he wanted to get the money up front.
Right.
After talking to his clients, he found out that they didn't care about the discount. They were perfectly happy paying him up front because they knew if they didn't pay him up front, 6 months later, the budget might get clawed back. So they wanted to spend the money while they could. Now, that's the corporate world. It's not the small business world. It's a whole different place. But it's understanding the motives of the client and what they really want and value. And if you don't, you accidentally give away your profit. And so that's big. What do you say to the people who are going to listen to this and go, not going to work in my industry? That's not how we do things in my industry.
I'm sure it's true that there are a lot of industries where that's not how most people do it, but I haven't yet come across a sort of professional services style of business that couldn't do this. I mean, buyers, just think of yourself as a buyer. Like when you go out to the store and you buy a book or you buy a soda or you buy a Starbucks or whatever, you don't know how much it cost. You don't know how long it took them. You don't really care what the cost was. You don't really care about that. You're just asking yourself, like, is this thing worth $5 to me right now in this situation? Is this beer worth $5? Am I at the ballpark? Is this beer worth $15? Well, at the ballpark, maybe it is. So to bring this back to professional services, it is tricky, right? So if when people say, oh, that won't work in my industry, it's almost always because they don't know how to have what I call the why conversation, which is something I learned from value-based fees, where they're just asking all the wrong questions. So they think that it would be impossible to do something like value pricing because they've got no experience of it. No one does it. There's no example of it. But if you find buyers who, basically all buyers, have the experience of just deciding how much the water is worth based on the price, and they don't really care how much it costs Poland Spring to get this bottle to my house. So if you just accept that as true, like buyers want a price up front, okay? And then we could talk about why won't it work in your industry, whatever your industry is. And the answer almost certainly is that you're selling inputs and deliverables, and the whole conversation in the sales interview is around inputs and deliverables. So things like, in my world, software world, when I worked at that hourly firm and I had to quote a job, I'd meet with a client and they'd tell me all of these things that they wanted me to do. Or they'd say, these are features that we want you to build. And they would describe the features, and I would try and uncover all of the scope that I could for that particular feature. And because I knew that I was going to take all of that scope and multiply it by the number of hours I thought each thing was going to take, and then I multiply that by my hourly rate, and I'd say, hey, I think it's going to be $150,000. But we never had a conversation around why they wanted the software, what outcomes they wanted the software to provide, how their business was going to be better, what they were going to do after the software was live. Let's say the software was done today. What would you do next? never had any of those conversations. It was just like them picking things off a menu almost and telling me, go do that stuff. And that is, I think, the reason why most people think it can't happen in their industry, because they're so used to being order takers and having the client tell them what to do instead of uncovering from the client what their underlying motivation is and what their desired outcome is, how they think you can contribute to that, and then coming up with clever ways, potentially, to get it done a lot faster and cheaper than the thing that they actually asked you to do. So the example I kind of bring up as a joke is like, if a client, think of it in a doctor model, a patient comes running into a doctor's office and says, "Doc, I need a triple bypass." And the doc says, "Okay, jump up on the table. I'll get my scalpels." Like, that doctor would be disbarred. Disbarred, that's legal. They'd be kicked out of the profession. But what do they do instead? They diagnose the problem. Tell me where it hurts. Why does it, how long has it been like this? What is normal like for you? Are you a long distance runner, or are you mostly sedentary? And this is not actually that uncommon. And they might say, well, there's three things you could do. You could take this antacid. That'll probably help. You could take this prescription medication. That might help. You could quit smoking. You could start exercising. There are all these different ways that feeling that you're experiencing that you thought was a heart attack and you needed a triple bypass. There are a lot of cheaper, easier, faster ways to potentially, not always, but potentially help this particular patient achieve the desired outcome. And I think people just aren't used to thinking like that. And I know that anybody out there that is a professional, knows what they're doing, and gets rehired by clients or gets referred by clients, they have happy clients. I know, I can guarantee that they provided some kind of beneficial outcome to the client, or they wouldn't get hired again. So a CPA or a lawyer or whatever, if they don't know what that beneficial outcome is, it feels like it's impossible in their industry. It's basically that they're approaching the sales interview from a scope first perspective instead of a scope last perspective.
This is what I find of most business owners. They're selling the process.
Yep.
They're not selling the outcome.
Yep. The labor, the hands, the hours, the time. Yep.
Yeah. When you sell the outcome, all the rest of it becomes irrelevant. Because most people don't care about the mechanism. People go, I have this problem. I want this outcome. Give me the outcome. I pay X. Okay, so be it. And
yeah, right.
That's the way the world works. But yet
Right.
We all try to sell the mechanism because we think it's all about the mechanism, and it's not. They don't care about how it's solved. They just want it solved.
Yeah, it's like if you hadn't wanted a new roof on your garage, you don't care how they do it, if they use a crane or if they have 10 guys come out there and there's a dumpster or not a dumpster. There's like a level of quality that you care about. There's a level of time that you want the project to take. And, if they could snap their fingers and do it instantaneously, you'd probably say yes. You don't want it to take a long time. You don't want to have to park your car on the road instead of the driveway because the dumpster is there. They don't care. If someone did re-roof my house and they spent an hour explaining to me how they were going to do it, I would feel like they were wasting my time. Like, I don't care about your proprietary process.
I'm with you on that. And I definitely agree. One of the things people might get confused about is how to set that fixed price. And I know you've got the book, and it's back there. Hourly Billing is Nuts.
Check you out.
And in the book, you gave a formula that I thought was great. It's like, what do you think it would be? How many hours? So let's say it's 10 hours at $100. So that would be $1,000 is your estimate. You said just mark it up 85%. You just give them that price. So then you go, okay, it's $1,850. And while some people might freak out about that, people like certainty.
Yeah.
And, let's face it, that was your estimate. It might take you longer. You could go over the $1,850, so you might lose sometimes. And if you're really smart and efficient and know how to build systems and processes, which I absolutely love, you'll get it done faster, which is cool too. But if the value is there, you're guaranteed to cover yourself, deal with mistakes, and if they ask for a little extra, you have room to give it to them. So you can be kind and say, no worries, you need that little extra, I'll take care of it for you. And it just creates a much better relationship, I think.
Oh, I agree. Any kind of fixed price, however you calculate it, is going to create a better client relationship. A couple of details that I want to tease out of that. That approach is usually what I recommend for people who have been billing hourly and they're really overwhelmed by the idea of jumping straight into value pricing because it takes some practice and there's a lot of gray area. It's very squishy. It's probably as much art as science to do value pricing well. So what I like to do is sort of like an interim step where they can start to feel the benefits of efficiency by giving a fixed price. And so like, well, how do I give a fixed price? Then I'd say, well, just tack on 85%, exactly like you described. But what's amazing about this that's not obvious is that the estimate, when you present it to the client, it's like do everything you normally would do. Scope first in the sales meeting. Don't change anything. The only thing you're going to change is this one addition to the proposal. So the first price, I think you said $1,000 price. That is an estimate. That is an estimated price. So it's like I think it'll take 10 hours at $100 an hour. It'd be $1,000 if I'm right. If it takes longer, it's going to be more. If it takes less time, it's going to be less. And or if you want to guarantee, if you don't want to take that risk that it might go over budget, then $1,850 is the fixed price, and then you don't have to worry about it. And then if I underestimated how long it's going to take, that's my problem. And what it does is it calls out, it makes explicit who's taking the risk. In an estimate, the buyer is taking the risk. With the fixed price, the seller is taking the risk. And so you give the buyer a choice. And so and it's surprising. I teach this to lots of people. It's surprising to them how many people take the fixed price because it's lower than what it's worth to them. And they really, like you said, they really want the certainty. And then what happens is when the project starts, your subconscious is going to be operating on the financial incentives, the new financial incentive to get this done without compromising quality, but to get this done as fast as you can, because that's how you get a raise. That's how you increase your margins, by being really good at what you do.
So I know you've read the Profit First book, and
Yeah.
the book is based on a principle, which is Parkinson's Law. You will use up all the time and money allocated.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you put that against yourself to say, hey, here's my allocation, if you know to squish it, and the fact that the less time you do, you can put those, you can reverse it to go against yourself so that you do your best to pick up efficiency however you can. And even like you talked about before, you would be more apt to use tools or invest in other tools or equipment or things to help you go faster because you can see the value creation on your side. So it's definitely worth it. What do you do with scope creep in something like that? Because I could see how that would be a problem.
Yeah, that's a common question. So with a project, let's focus on projects where a project has like a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it's supposed to achieve a particular outcome. That outcome is worth something to the client, and that's what your base price is on. So I coming out of the sales interview, I've got that information, and I can put together a proposal with 3 prices. I like to give options, also an Allen Weiss thing. And there's going to be 3 incremental options that are different ways that I could engage, almost like different altitudes at which I could engage with the client. So there'll be small, medium, large, or good, better, best, or however you want it. And they're basically it's like 3 different kinds of things. So let's just say the outcome is worth $100,000 to the client. So the next thing I do, before I've even thought about scope, I'll set those 3 prices. All right, now I've got a $10,000 price, I've got a $22,000 price, and I've got a $50,000 price. That's the Goldilocks pricing curve. You can Google for that. And then I say to myself, what scope, what things would I put in that $10,000 price that would move the desired needle for the client a little bit? So now the client's gone. Like, meeting is over. I've got the value. I've got the 3 prices that are small fractions of the value. The first one's only at 10% of the value. So what could I put in here? Well, maybe I could put in my pre-recorded videos, or maybe I record three videos for them, but I'll end up selling them for other clients later. Maybe I do a half day workshop with their senior leaders, or maybe I coach their software development team, or I teach them some, maybe it's like a training session. It's like, okay, I could do all of that for 10,000. I'd be fist pumpingly happy to do that for 10,000. Okay, on top of that, what could I do for 22,000? Maybe I add on 3 weeks of coaching and reviewing pull requests for the software developers involved. Whatever. You just layer on a higher level of service at each price point. So you're coming up with the scope, which is your cost. You're coming up with that last. So it goes value, price, scope, or value, price, cost in my approach to pricing projects. And at the top level, you give them I'll do all of the boilerplate code. I'll set up the repos. I'll do all of the foundational work. And then you've got internal developers, or you can bring in some freelancers. And, once we've got the foundation and the walls up, they can hang drywall and shingle it. And, I'll make sure they don't screw it up. But so you get these 3 levels of involvement that you could undertake with the client. All 3 of them drive toward the same goal. It's just how much of you they're getting to help them on the way. So here's how you control scope creep in a model like this. You say right up front, right in the sales call, also in the proposal, you say, look, you're bringing in an expert like me, or you're considering bringing in an expert like me, because I know you've tried to do this before and it hasn't worked. You spent a ton of money on other consultants that didn't work. You've tried to hire for it, do it internally. You tried to do it on the cheap. None of these things worked. One of the things I'm going to do that a lot of other people won't do, and this is partially because I don't bill by the hour, is I am going to say no to anything that doesn't contribute to the desired outcome of this project. So if I'm in there working on the website because we want to increase the conversion rate on mobile for this e-commerce store, and a salesman comes in and says, oh, could you put a carousel on the homepage while you're in there working on the website? I would say, well, how's that going to contribute to the stated goal of this project, which is to increase conversions on mobile? And we'll say, well, it doesn't, but our competitors have one and it looks really cool. And I think it'll increase SEO or traffic or time on site or some other metric that we are not optimizing for. I'll say, well, that's an interesting idea. I'll put it in the parking lot. I'll keep track of all these requests. But I'm going to say no to requests that would jeopardize the outcome of this project. And getting random requests that don't contribute to the goal jeopardize the outcome of the project. So it gives you a leg to stand on to tell them no and say, well, you brought me in because I'm an expert. You're asking me to do this thing. You can't make a business case for it. I can't make a business case for it. So let's not jeopardize the project. Let's just hold on to these ideas. And once we declare victory on the mobile conversion rate, then we can revisit all of these other ideas.
And that makes sense. Also defining what the outcomes are, defining what you are doing and what you're not is super helpful. I do the same thing, and I've never really run into issues. I see other people seem to run into issues, and I don't know why, but I've always been lucky that we help our clients and we deliver everything, and there's never been an extra charge or we've never even gotten to that point. It's funny though, because I did a talk recently at the Home Builders, and afterwards I was talking to one of the builders, and just through the conversation back and forth, he realized, looking at value pricing and having the conversations and how he was billing, he left $10 million on the table, which is a lot of money on a project.
Yeah.
Because it all would have gone to his bottom line. And this is the same client that they were fighting, and they got reductions from him. And he's like, wow, had I done this differently, I would have walked away with so much more money. And that's just what happens.
It's a huge mindset shift. It is 180 degrees different than what most people are used to, how most people are used to selling and quoting. They tell me all the things you want me to do. I'm going to make a big list and I'm going to total it all up. I'm going to guess at how long it's going to take me. And I'm going to multiply that guess by a number I made up, which is my hourly rate. And I'm going to show that to you. And it's definitely wrong. So it just makes no sense to me. But I understand the fear of scope creep. And that, guess where that fear is coming from? That fear is coming from the risk that you're taking, and guess what comes from risk? Reward. So here's another thing on scope creep just popped into my head, is that hourly billing encourages scope creep. So a lot of times I have to sort of deprogram a software developer who thinks, no, every single project has scope creep. Every single project goes over the estimate and it's all the client's fault. It's all the client's fault. I'm like, well, really? I mean, you're incentivized financially to take longer. You are disincentivized financially to think of any outside of the box approaches that might achieve the outcome faster or maybe even at higher quality. You just don't think of buying plugins. You don't think of whatever the thing might be. You don't look for shortcuts that are not cutting corners, but actually a shorter path to the goal, because that would make you less money. So they think every client is, impossible to manage and that everything, they always request all these out of scope things. But I don't really think that's what it is. I think certainly not all cases. A lot of times it's because you're not working as efficiently as you could. So, there's less scope. Scope creep matters so little. Like when I was still doing software development, the level of concern or like the fear is so high in people who are considering this approach. But when I was actually doing this approach, I never thought about scope creep. It was not on my mind at all. I might have worried about it before I started, but once I was on a project, it felt less like scope creep and it felt more like I was free to do the project however I wanted. Maybe I wanted to take longer because there's something really cool and elegant that I could put in there. Why should I charge the client? Because I'm getting my jollies doing like some really cool code. I just know it's in there. It's like a craftsman building a bench and like adding flourishes and stuff to it like that. That is cutting into their profits, but that's also where the fun comes from. So I just never had a problem with scope creep. I mean, I had some projects take longer than I thought, but that's my fault for underestimating them. But you're still not getting killed. You're still making really good money. And it only happens in 1 in 10 projects, if that, maybe 1 in 100. So you still come out way, way ahead.
I concur with you. If people would like to learn more about you or the book, how do they find you?
Best place to go, if you're really interested in value-based pricing, you can go to valuepricingbootcamp.com, and that'll redirect to a page on my site that has a free email course that comes from my personal email. You can reply to any messages and get in touch with me. I read every email. I'm always in my email inbox. I'm always sending emails. So that's a great way to get in touch. I have a podcast too, whatever. If you just go to the website, you'll find everything.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It was a pleasure. I'm always happy to meet a like-minded individual. It makes me feel like the mission is working.
It's definitely working.
Great.
If this episode made you realize hourly billing is quietly capping your income and creating friction with clients, don't just sit there and shake your head. Make the switch. You want Jonathan's help? Then go to his website, Value Pricing Bootcamp, and grab his training. And if you want help translating this into your entire business, ensuring it's profitable, figuring out what that looks like and how it would roll out and what it would mean to your bottom line, including ways to make it happen and make sure you still make money and get paid up front, that's what we do. It's no extra charge for our clients. If that's what they want to work on this month, that's what they get. It's all included. Isn't that awesome? If you know someone who needs to hear this, would you do me a favor and share it with them? I'd appreciate you for doing that. Tired of scaling and growing beyond your cash? Ready to end the cash flow roller coaster and build real wealth inside and outside your business? We should talk. I serve 7 and 8 figure mission-driven business owners increase their profit and cash flow while working less. We help you build the businesses that run without you, so you work less and make more. Book your discovery call today. There's a link in the show notes. You'll work directly with me as your Chief Profitability Officer. If you're a 6-figure business owner, check out the Profit Blueprint program at ProfitComesFirst.com. It's your guided path to mastering your numbers with my assistance at an affordable investment for your revenue. Check out my other podcast, Richer Soul. It covers leading yourself and building the ultimate life in business. There's also a link in the show notes. Thanks for listening to the podcast, where revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king. Have a profitable week.